Hey everyone. I'm going to start this with the noises of my dog trying to bury something. Uh, I also wanted to say there's a lot of misinformation spread nowadays, right? Fake statistics, charts being manipulated to look certain ways, right? If you've ever taken a statistics class, you can see how easy it is to change data to look very enticing, for any belief, really. That's why, right? I want to start this by saying that these are things that I've read in very cool ideas and stuff that you can, talk about and philosophize. Is that a word? It is now, fuck it. Philosophize about. And have fun thinking about, right? Science is a constant rotating wheel of finding things out, doing tests on those things, and the amount of times that those tests confirm the thing, it's more solidified, right? But also all the time, we find new things that happen, or we find holes in that thing that was found, and all of a sudden there's another theory, right? Science is this constant evolving wheel of what the fuck is actually happening. No one knows. We're trying to figure out things that are really hard to understand with the thing that, especially with research around the brain and genetics, right? Genetics is a very complex field. And our brain is even more complex, right? And we're trying to use our brain to understand the brain, which is very funny to think about. We're trying to use something to understand itself, right? Which, we can understand ourselves as people, right? How we act in the world, how we move around the world, what things usually lead to the other things, right? Our behaviors, and how those correlate to our past, which in itself is a marvel. But there are very intricate workings that are very difficult to understand. Right now impossible to understand. There's there's a lot of research going on in the field of brain that just is not understood, and that's why you research things, right? Anyway. There's a correlation between genetics and religion, right? There's a certain genetic factor to being religious, which is very interesting to think about, especially when you look at history, right? There were many wars fought over religion. There were many times in history where if you didn't believe in a religion, wherever you were, there was a religion, right? Nowadays in America, right, where we live, most of the people you talk to are like, I'm kind of loosely religious, right? That's not how it was, right? And I'm not here to say if religion is good or bad. I think it's a good moral compass, right? It helps people have faith in things. It helps people comfort themselves in a world that is very much unknown, right? I have my own religious beliefs, and it does help comfort me. It helps me steady myself and ground myself, and it helps me look forward to the future, and feel that no matter what, I am protected. I am connected to something other than myself, right? And even talking about that, it's hard to take a step outside of yourself and be like, okay, this thing I believe in might just be that, right? Might just be a belief that I have to comfort myself, that I have to bring order to a world that has no order, right? And in the sciences, you have to do that, right? In the sciences, you have to do that. You have to disconnect from what you think something should be to figure out what it actually is, right? And I just ended up talking about science, I guess, but I like science. It's fun. If you can't tell, I was a STEM major. Kind of am. I haven't finished my degree yet, but I will. To take a step outside of yourself and really be like, I believe in this thing, right? And I have my own reasons for believing that. And me in my life, right? I've had enough things at this point. I've been pointed towards it enough times, right? I've gone towards religion and then backed up, and gone towards it and backed up, right? A couple times in my life. And there's this point where, and this wasn't honestly all that long ago, like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, where I couldn't turn back from it anymore. I couldn't take that step backwards again, right? There was a part of me that always wanted it in my life, right? There's a part of me that always wanted that always needed that. And every time I took a step away, I was pulled back towards it, right? Once I took that first step and started to believe, and I took a step back, there was something else that came up that made me step back towards, right? And genetics is a very interesting field, in that there is so much at a deeper level that we don't understand, right? Especially when it comes to the genetics in personality and genetics in how we act in the world and behaviors. And there are so many genes that are activated with each other and are linked in some way that we can't pick out, oh, this gene causes this, right? This gene causes this. That is almost not the case for anything, right? For a lot of the things that we have a lot of interest in, right? Like how people manifest personality traits, how people, can you look at a baby's brain and be able to be like, oh, well, this person will grow up like this, and this. And the reality of the situation is you can't predict that anyway, because your gene expression is changed by your environment. That's a field of genetics called epigenetics, where your outside environment actually changes how your genetics are expressed, how your genes express themselves. And that's a whole field I don't understand. It's very complicated, and people in the field don't understand it very well either. But a lot of it is with twin studies, right? And yada yada, whatever, psychology textbook. With religion being shown to be genetic, right? There's some amount of pull people get towards it, right? Something in your body telling you, well, I gotta follow religion, right? And when you think about how, that I got off on a tangent. When you think about how the world used to be, there's all those shows of medieval time, right? And this was, the Crusades, and there was heavy religious, zealotry, and you have to believe this religion or you're a heretic and we'll fucking burn you at the stake. And people you don't we would go to war over these things, right? That religion at some point turned into a way to control people, right? It turned into this, okay, let's make this set of beliefs, right? And we have all the people we conquer, they have to believe in these things, right? This text, right? They have to believe in this text. And if they don't, then X, Y, Z, right? They get put in prison, they get executed, they get exiled, whatever. And this happened around the world, right? It happened around the world. In some parts of the world, it wasn't about religion, it was just conquering, right? Like the Mongols. Although they did believe, it depends on which tribe, or because they were nomadic, right? Depends on which tribe, but they had beliefs around nature, closer to Native American beliefs, where they worshipped the mountains, they worshipped the sun, they worshipped trees, they worshipped nature, in a very general sense, right? And they believed in the soul and the spirit, and yeah. In these societies where you were forced to believe a certain way, right? You had to believe this, or you couldn't live in this society that was providing you sustenance, as you had a job in, all this. Ooh, sounded a little too familiar to life currently, which kind of sucks. Think about that for a second. Anyway. You gotta laugh about it, or you'll go crazy. That's really, gotta laugh or you'll go crazy. You were forced to believe these ways or you couldn't live in the society, right? If you think about epigenetics, right, your environment controlling gene expression, right? People who were not innately religious, these genes might have started expressing themselves, right? The body's way to survive, right? It adapted to survive in this environment where you had to be religious, right? And there's some amount of we trick our brains into doing certain things, right? We have like affirmations. We have, when you start affirmations, right? They don't feel like anything when you start them. When you keep doing them, eventually they start to have an effect, right? They start to become habitual. They start to make sense to you. They start to actually have meaning behind them, right? Maybe the original meaning you intended them to that they didn't have when you started, right? And that's just one of the many examples of how we trick our brains to survive, right? And it's crazy how religion went from this sense of community, right? This sense of community, this sense of connection to something greater than yourself, this connection to things outside of yourself that made you feel good, right? That made you have compassion for others, that brought you a sense of peace, got turned into fear. Fear of God's wrath if you do something wrong. Fear of karmic retribution, right? Fear of the world, right? Fear of making a mistake. Fear of giving into an impulse. Fear in general. It changed from this thing that gave you life to this thing that kept you in a cage. And that isn't when people adapted religion to survive, it was not based in fear. It was based in hope. It was based in faith. Nothing we do to survive should be based in fear. That's the number one thing I've learned as I've been growing myself is there's always a way to look at something that doesn't involve fear. There's always a way to look at something that doesn't involve fear. Fear of failure, fear of making a mistake, right? Let's just talk about that for a second. Why would you fear making a mistake? Mistakes are a part of growth, right? Making a mistake is on the path to getting better at something. So why would you fear doing it? If anything, making a mistake or a failure is a beautiful, beautiful thing because it means you tried. It means you took that first step to try something that you aren't a master at. No one becomes a master. No one is a master of anything instantly, right? You might have natural gifts at something, right? That makes it easier for you, but no one's a master when they start. There's actually this very beautiful, I started reading a book recently, and it talked about the word master, right? And master to some people in Chinese culture just means someone who began before you. Someone who began before you. It's just someone who's tried for longer, someone who's worked at it longer than you, right? Learning is on the student. That's the thing, learning is on the student. And maybe I'm not saying teachers are bullshit. I'm not saying teachers don't have value. They do. They absolutely do. They help you learn faster, right? A teacher who learned through doing things themselves, a good teacher can help you along that path and help you achieve it faster, right? And a good teacher realizes that, yes, there are principles, right? There are basic things that need to be known. There are things long written down, long known, the basis of it, right? But there's also things that students need to learn on their own. And they need to be allowed to think freely and to form their own conclusions about what things might mean, right? That's how you get new researchers in the field, right? When you give them a subject, like the things that we know, right, about mental illness, about, how these things work in the brain, you don't tell them, oh, this is the theory I think, right? This is what I think's really going on. If they're inclined, they will think about it themselves, and they'll come to a conclusion, and maybe at some point, they'll search and see if their conclusion is right. And that's a beautiful thing. Because even in that action of searching for this truth, they might discover a different truth. They might discover a different avenue, right? I just thought again about where I started this video and how the fuck I ended up here. This is kind of what I do. I'm starting to learn this is kind of what I do. I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just gonna end it with this. Science is a revolving door of people looking for the truth. And is that not also what people who follow a spiritual path do as well? They're searching in different ways, sure. But, I mean, the Buddhist religion is about achieving enlightenment, which is, I'm not super versed in Buddhist culture. I don't want to, offend anyone with anything. To have a great understanding of oneself, right? To really find out who you are. And with that comes the understanding that we're all human. We're all human. We're all connected by our species, right? It's like, our closest living relatives are, genetically anyway, are the chimpanzees and the bonobos. But yeah, bonobos. We're tied to them too, in profound ways. We're bound to everything that came before us, just as everything that comes after will be bound to us, right? We all come from somewhere, And we all came from somewhere. We all evolved from somewhere, right? There's a very long history of people and animals before us that we are connected to, just as everything that comes after will be connected to us. And you think about watching YouTube videos, right? Like, this is something that no one would have imagined. I mean, hell, 1,000 years ago, right? Well, obviously 1,000 years ago. Let's say 200, 100, right? What fucking year is it? It's like 2050. What fucking year is it? Oh man, it's been a crazy couple of years. 3. Yeah, I'd say crazy 3 years probably. Man, you know, shit's wild. Shit's wild out here. They never would have imagined watching a YouTube video. And you think about are these gonna be the things, the archives, the glimpses at our culture 200 years thousands of years in the future when our civilization has been lost? Are they going to be able to find these and get glimpses into what culture was like, what our culture was like, you know? Just thinking out loud. Anyway.